What's up guys, Suris here. So this video is going to be a little different than what you normally see on my channel. It's going to be another interview, which I haven't done in a while. This one is for Michael Steward, who is the Assistant State Director of American Atheists in Kentucky. He contacted me about getting an interview put together to help raise awareness for the protest that's going to be going on at the Ark Park. This was done without the use of cameras, it was audio only, so please enjoy with your ears. There will not be a lot of visual for the eyes. Let's roll the intro. Go ahead and introduce yourself, what you guys are about, and the floor is yours.
Alright, so my name is Michael Steward. I'm one of the Assistant State Directors for American Atheists for Kentucky. So this Saturday, it's going to be our third annual protest at the Ark Encounter. And this is something that's been thrown on for 3 years now by the Tristate Freethinkers, which is a group that, deals with Kentucky, Ohio, and Indiana, hence the Tri-State. Essentially, we get a lot of people out there. We stand out on the highway there with our signs and stuff. There's usually a number of speakers. We got R&R out tonight or tomorrow for the protests, and several other people. I don't have the list in front of me, but you covered it in the other video.
Yep.
So the goal of the protest is essentially to bring attention to the type of separation of church and state problems that we're having not only in Kentucky but all over our nation lately. We've seen a lot of things like the recent ruling on the cake decorators, that whole fiasco. There's just been a lot of mingling of church and state, and we're trying to bring attention to that. When you look at if you were to look at 3 years ago, before the Ark Park protests, or before the Ark Park opened, all the media leading up to it wrote the Ark in a positive light. But once the Tri-State Freethinkers and American Atheists and a bunch of other activists got together and started working towards changing the narrative, bringing attention to what this is really about, then we saw a shift in the media starting to expose, what the Ark Encounter actually expose it for what it is, which is a huge violation, separation of church state. It's a monument to ignorance. It's anti-science. It's discriminatory. It's bad in every way you can think.
I would also say that it's technically abusive towards its employees because it takes 2% of their funding and moves it over into paying back the loan. And I believe that the only thing that actually should work like that would be a union, and it's not a union, it's closer to a church.
Yeah, exactly. With their hiring practices, it's essentially, if you don't subscribe to their specific brand of young earth creationism, you're not getting hired on. No Jews, no Catholics, definitely no atheists.
And nobody from the LGBTQ community either.
Oh yeah, definitely that. And if you're not married, you gotta sign a waiver of chastity or a pledge of chastity. And so that's real good for them.
Oh yeah, that was one of the things that really got me, because if you're working somewhere for any reason, the job environment should not have any control over who you sleep with, as long as an issue of nepotism does not come into play.
Yeah.
And
yeah, the kind of fraternization type stuff.
Yes, and if it's but with the Ark Park, what you have is instead you have an environment where they're trying to essentially say that all of our workers are pure. They're saying none of our workers are LGBTQ. None of them are Catholic. They're all pure of heart. They're all pure of carnal sins. That's essentially what they're doing, and I can see huge problems with that, because that's not only does it paint the employer in a terrible light because they're limiting what their people can do, but it also makes the employees feel, I would say, better about themselves, because there's the idea of the in-group purity. And it really reinforces that, and that's actually an incredibly toxic mindset. So there's a reason why they can get away with this. So if you look at organizations like American Atheists, we only hire atheists. We're a nonprofit organization, and that allows us to
bring on the type of people that we want to bring on. You know,
didn't Ken technically sell the Ark to a nonprofit, and that's how he's able to do it now?
Yes. So just to continue my point, and I'll go into this. The actual Ark structure itself works as a nonprofit, but the gate that sells the tickets is a for-profit business.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how they get past the, they just dump in through loopholes there. And so what happened, the city was going to enforce a tax on tickets to parks like that, like a safety tax to pay for like emergency services should they need to go to the park for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
And Ken Ham didn't like that so much, so he sold the Ark to I don't remember if he sold it to Angelos and Genesis or to himself. Anyway, there was an exchange of property to avoid that tax. And so the city said, hey, if you do that, we're not going to give you that $18 million tax incentive break. And so he said, oh, okay, so I guess we'll just take the safety tax. And so he sold it back. And so when you got this flip-flop of every time he does that, he technically has to reapply for the tax cut. But he's just jumping through holes just to avoid paying money.
Doesn't this... So I would like to make a joke here, and as bad as it is to make a joke about somebody at their own expense, I would love to say that prolific young Earth creationists seem to have a terribly bad time with the tax code.
Yes, with Kent Hovind. Kent Hovind got caught. What's really funny is like Christianity in general. I don't know necessarily if it's just a young Earth creationist thing, but Christianity in general tends to toe the line of generosity and charity and what have you, but they don't seem to be so charitable towards paying their taxes or doing what's right. And I know there's verses in the Bible that say obey the laws of the state and stuff like that.
The law of the land, pretty much.
The law of the land, yeah, essentially. So there's a lot. There's hypocrisy abound. Like it's crazy when you talk to these people, because there's always counter protesters. I went the first year we did this, and I missed last year, and I'm glad I get to go this year again. There's counter protesters there everywhere. So I had run-ins with Eric Hovind the first year I went, and just talking to some of these guys, it's almost heartbreaking when you hear like the cognitive dissonance coming out everywhere. I mean, they're so brainwashed. It's really quite sad.
What's also worse is that there's a bit of a feedback loop where typically you have the deceivers and then you have the deceived. And that's typically what you have in a lot of cult mindsets. And what happens with the young Earth creationist movement is because it's veiled in this idea that it's Christianity. Because I've met very sound-minded, rational Christians that I'm friends with. It's not necessarily always a Christianity thing, but it is definitely a heavy thing with a lot of Christians. What you end up having is this feedback loop where not only do you have the deceivers and the deceived, your deceived also become deceivers.
Yes.
So you've got people like, for instance, you'd have somebody like Steven Anderson, who is an incredibly bigoted individual, and then he teaches somebody like, say, Matt Powell, if you're familiar with him as of late.
Yes, I've heard of him.
He will teach somebody like Matt Powell, and then because he taught Matt Powell, now you have a deceiver who was taught another deceived how to be a deceiver. And this deceiver is also a fan of Kent Hovind, who is another deceiver who taught his son how to be a deceiver. It's a terrible feedback loop because you don't just have one person at the head who's causing everybody underneath to have the terrible ideas. They're teaching the people with the terrible ideas to do the exact same thing they did to bring people in.
And something interesting is when you got these guys like Eric Hovind and Ray Comfort, I don't like to call people liars when they could just be stupid.
Mm-hmm.
But the guys like Ray Comfort and Eric Hovind have talked to the brightest and the best on these topics. They've talked to scientists, philosophers. I really don't think there's any excuse at this point why they don't understand this. It's just this is their life. They make money off of it. I mean, I really do believe that Eric Hovind is a professional liar.
Well, it's a combination of things in my eyes. I typically try to give people the benefit of the doubt that they're not actively trying to be deceitful. Typically, I try to think that they're doing everything they can to say what they believe is true. Obviously, that does not work in all scenarios, but I try to give it to them. The excuse that I typically see from young Earth creationists when it comes to stuff like this, especially more prolific ones, is your scientists may know this, but do they know what God knows? Satan could put fossils in the ground and tricking you from believing in God, which is a dumb excuse if I've ever heard one. But you also have the theist, or in this case the young Earth creationist, who has now said a pointed statement, not realizing that the tip of that point is the tip of a double-edged sword. Because not only does the atheist obviously not know the mind of God or the physicist they're talking to, but now the Christian is presuming to know the mind of God, which would be akin to blasphemy. But they don't realize that.
Yes. And, so I always enjoy talking to these guys. I'm probably going to be talking to several of the counter-protesters on Saturday. This time, I'm pretty much going to be focusing on two main areas, because I remember last time, you know, you just want to argue about science and different facts and stuff. This time, like, the two areas I'm going to be focusing on is, you know, if you were wrong, would you want to know? And the other area is, you know, establishing there's a God first before you start telling me what God does.
Yeah, don't be sidechain Bergen Kate.
Yeah, if God doesn't exist, then he can't do things. So let's talk about whether or not God exists first. And then we'll decide what he did or didn't do.
Yep, but unfortunately what you get there is you'll have a theist respond to you, if they know their way around words at least. They'll respond by saying, you're attacking my presupposition about God, but we all have presuppositions. You presuppose that the sun is going to come up, or they say that that's faith, or they'll equate that to anything in order to project it back onto you.
Yeah, they'll do that, but they'll fail because it's not the same thing at all.
It's not the same thing. I think typically though, and this is just my view on what happens at protests like that a lot, and not just protests, but debates work the exact same way, is you're almost never going to convince the people that are actually there.
Yes.
However, the people who watch the content afterwards, they're the ones who will be convinced, and therein lies the value of debates and protest and discourse like that.
Yeah, so there's always something that really interesting that happens is when you're talking to someone who doesn't seem to know the arguments very well, who is mired in logical fallacies, and someone watches that person be made a fool of, and they identify with those ideas, they in turn feel as they've been made a fool of, and they tend to take that to heart, you know, a lot more than if they were actually the ones being talked to.
Yeah, and I see that a lot, especially with there's a lot of people who have watched people like Matt Dillahunty, Godless Cranium, Rationality Rules, and they were watching the content because they enjoyed it, and then slowly but surely they started to realize exactly how much the side they were making fun of mirrored themselves.
Yes.
And sometimes it's not even making fun of. Obviously, you know, somebody like Godless Cranium, who I respect a lot, will use mockery once in a while to get a point across, whereas somebody like Matt Dillahunty, unless he's angry, usually won't use mockery. But attacking from both angles typically helps in situations like this.
Yeah. So, I mean, I really enjoy the conversations. I like to have, I mean, it's fun for me. I know a lot of people think it's a headache, it's not worth it. Why are you wasting time talking to these people? Really, a big reason I do it because I think it's fun. And I think these topics are important. You know, I care about the truth. And if I'm wrong, maybe I'll go Saturday and someone will give me a piece of evidence that I haven't thought about, and I'll be a young Earth creationist by the end of it.
Yeah, I know. One of the ideas that I tried to propose in the video I did on the Ark Encounter earlier, which you saw, is that you can't just let bad ideas sit and fester, because they're going to do exactly that. If you find bad ideas, or ideas that you think are bad, because you could be wrong, you need to challenge those ideas, bring them to the light, and then when the light exposes them, you'll see whether or not they're shiny or fool's gold.
Absolutely. And this is something I talk about every freaking time, you know, free speech comes up. It's because I went to a convention in Nashville a couple years back, and there was a seminar on hate speech there. And essentially, the person giving the seminar was pushing the idea that we should not allow hate speech and things like, that sort of thing.
When you censor any type of speech, you allow those ideas to fester.
Absolutely. And this was just after that, I don't know the guy's name, the neo-Nazi that got punched on camera.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, this was right after that happened. And essentially, it was kind of a group conversation type thing. It wasn't just one person sitting up in front talking the whole time. My argument was, look, we know these ideas are bad, but we can't change bad ideas unless we're allowed to talk about them.
You have to be able to expose them.
And every person who's been a Christian, every person who is religious and is now an atheist, changed their mind because of argument and evidence. They didn't change their mind because someone said, no, you're not allowed to say those ideas anymore. You're not allowed to think like that.
No, telling somebody they're not allowed to think like that is one of the fastest ways to make them start thinking like that.
Absolutely.
Like, you see it all the time when you've got people who get shot down for their ridiculously fringe theories on science, such as somebody like a flat earther. What happens is they get shut down so many times, they retreat into the in-group, and the in-group is a notoriously deviant echo chamber. And as this person retreats into the echo chamber, now this person may not be haggling you, they might not be saying things to you anymore, but now they're getting so much reinforcement because you've put them into that corner that you're letting the idea fester, you're letting it grow. And it doesn't just have to do with something like Flat Earth, it can have to do with somebody who's a neo-Nazi. If somebody, as an example, they're talking on any type of forum where they're only talking with people of their own kind, you get that reinforcement that's positive, negative, what have you, and people like this start to do nothing but fester, and it's terrible. It's one of the reasons why I make it a point, and I know that there are other people in the community do as well. I know Shannon Q does this. She tries to have conversations with theists all the time. I try to hop on streams with other apologists and talk with them and befriend them as long as they're not, Matt Powell's and Steven Anderson's.
Yeah.
And get to know these people. Because at the end of the day, even if you don't want to hear these bad ideas, these people are human.
Yeah. I mean, and they deserve, at least as much as any non-violent person deserves.
Which is why I made the distinction for Powell's and Anderson's.
Yeah.
Well, so you've talked about what you're going to be doing at the event, and you guys this is your third year doing this, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I know in the video I covered that you guys are going to have food that is there for anybody who is willing to protest, not to park at the actual area itself. Don't go into the park itself, at least not this time. If you want to hop in the Ark Park, do it on another day.
I actually, the first year I went, I actually got taken on a tour through the park by Eric Hogan. And that was a pretty eye-opening experience. Because, for me at this point, this was, the first big thing as an atheist I had done. I was actually a fairly new atheist at the point.
Mm-hmm.
And I went into this Ark, and you see just how well-funded this stuff is. They're not just, cardboard cutouts of dinosaurs and what have you.
No, they have
these guys got money
in there.
Yeah, these guys got money, and they're using it. I mean, that Ark was not cheap, and it's really well put together. At least structurally.
Yeah, it doesn't sit on a very good foundation, metaphorically.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is a lot of people who hold positions in American Atheists now, that was their first thing. Because the Kentucky State Director, that was his first big thing as an atheist. There was a couple assistants. I mean, it was my first thing. That was it was my first big event as an atheist. So it really, when you go there, it woke a lot of people up, I think, because this young Earth creationist thing isn't just some crazy small group tucked in the corner of Kentucky.
No,
they're all over the country. I mean, just a couple.
The school that I grew up in taught me how to be a young Earth creationist. It was a Christian private school.
Just a couple of days ago, I was sitting and eating breakfast with my girlfriend, and I heard a conversation going on next to me. Two people who were talking about the age of the Earth and were convinced that it was young and that God just made everything appear to be old when he made it.
Yeah, and that's the issue that we addressed earlier in the conversation where It's just an attempt to test your faith at that point. And that's one reason why I cannot stand young Earth creationism. I can handle religion as long as it doesn't stick its fingers a little too far in politics. And at that point, go pray in your church, go pray in your mosque, go have a blast. But young Earth creationism, and specifically, it poisons science.
Absolutely.
Astrophysics doesn't work in a young Earth model. The speed of light doesn't work in a young Earth model. Evolution, which is one of the theories we use as a backbone behind a lot of modern medicine,
it's the corner of biology. I always want to talk to, I always ask them, you ever been to a doctor? You ever taken any kind of medication? Evolution is the reason why our understanding of evolution is why we can keep up with the changes in medicine and the changes in different diseases and viruses.
Evolution is the reason why you can't fight the common cold. It evolves too quickly for us to make dedicated medicine for it, and yet people still believe there's a young Earth, but we have evidence all around us of that. When somebody tells me evolution isn't true and the human body was perfectly designed by God, I ask them what happens if you fall on your tailbone too hard. And they go, oh, it breaks, and then it doesn't heal correctly. I'm like, yes, because it's vestigial. Do you know what a vestigial bone is? Because whales have them too. Whales have hips for some strange reason. Did God design whales with hips? Okay.
Why do they have like the same bone structure as bats in their fins, essentially?
Yep.
I mean, you can look at the lineages of these animals. I mean, I remember taking evolutionary courses in college, and they just break down the lineages for these different animals. That there's no reason why these animals would have the same bone structure from a creation standpoint,
And whenever you do break those things down, typically you get one of two answers. You either get the straw man of evolution, which is comparing it to, say, Lamarckian's evolution or Aristotle's ladder, which are two concepts that have been long since thrown out. Even though I will say that Ken Ham is probably the best example of Aristotle's ladder I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah.
However, the other canned response that you end up getting here is common design, common designer. And I would just say that proves that God is probably the least creative individual in the entire cosmos.
Absolutely. And it's just... I think if God did design all this stuff, he's pretty terrible at it. Because if I had all the powers of God, I can make a way better person, I think. You could just change one thing. You could change, what if people's teeth didn't rot?
Yeah,
that's a better person.
I would say that teeth is probably one of the worst evolved parts of our bodies.
Absolutely. Our teeth are terrible. We have to cut. If you don't upkeep constantly, they fall out.
Yep.
It's terrible.
Not to mention until we had modern dentistry, dental issues were one of the leading causes of death in humans.
Yeah, I mean, there's heart disease that's linked to dental problems. It's terrible. Teeth are terrible from a design point.
They are, which means God is a terrible designer if he did design. So the next thing I would like to ask, I know that at the event you guys do have some speakers. In the video that I did, I showed
you nailed all the speakers. I can't think of them right now because I don't have the list in front of me. I'm a terrible representative of American atheists.
When I was making the video, I did actually have the website pulled up so I could reference throughout the entire thing. Granted, the video was unscripted, which is why it looks kind of weird, but still.
It looked pretty good. I thought you did well.
Well, I stopped scripting my stuff a long time ago, and somehow I got more viewers, and I don't even understand how that happened.
I think, yeah.
But in any case, you guys do have Seth Andrews who's going to be there, who I am a huge fan of.
He's great. He's brilliant.
And in the video that I had before, it was Hemet Meta, and then you guys have Aaron Raw coming this time as well.
Yes.
Me and Aaron are going to be doing something this Wednesday, and I would have loved to be able to be there at the park to talk to him then as well, but unfortunately I don't get to fanboy that much.
Well, I'll fanboy for you. I mean, I got to meet him once before. He's a really cool guy.
Yeah, he's
great to talk to. I know it's the stereotype, kind of, it's the joke, but he just always reminds me of the villain from the Mulan Disney movie.
See, he reminds me more of Ratcliffe from Pocahontas.
Oh, yeah, I get that, yeah.
And me and, actually, I was talking with JMD Apologetics the other day, and we came up with this joke, because we saw the picture that compared Aaron Raw in his hat to Ratcliffe, the villain from the Pocahontas movie.
Yeah, definitely.
And we came up with this thing where instead of the song Savages, Aaron would just be saying, Hovens, they're barely even human.
Oh my god, that's too good.
But with that said, about how long do your speakers normally speak for? About half an hour each, or how does that normally work?
Well, so this is gonna be a little bit different because we're gonna have some speakers that are up there to just do like pep talks, like get the crowd energized, and then there's gonna be speakers that are doing like educational type speeches. And uh, I think last I heard it was probably 30, 40 minutes for the long talks and about 5 to 10 for like the pep talks. But I
Okay.
could be wrong. I mean, don't quote me on that.
Well, you guys have 4 hours to fill.
Yeah.
So should end up being fine. So timeline-wise, you've got the first hour, which is the actual protest itself. Then
Yes.
45 minutes after that, you've got a rally with the speakers. That I would imagine would be the pep talk you were talking about.
Yes.
After that, you've got marching 2x2 to the Ark encounter because.
Yes,
but-
and it's gonna be 2 by 2 same sex, just to push that point a little bit more.
See, I was gonna say that you needed to have at least 2 people that had lions' manes on. Because
have you seen the pictures been floating around with the 2 male lions going up to the ark?
Yes, Noah would have a very hard time getting them to breed.
It's gonna be a little bit weird.
30 minutes after that, you've got the protest in front of the Ark encounter itself.
Yes.
For 15 minutes, you have the march back to the protest site, originally the one near the highway. And then that's where you guys are going to be having lunch for about 30 minutes. And then you'll have a live podcast for 30 minutes. That's going to be... So you guys are doing the live podcast outdoors as well, correct?
Yes, everything's gonna be outdoors because we have a little mini stage and a PA that we've bought over a couple years ago, so we've got that for
Okay.
our use. It's just convenient.
Alrighty. And then you got your closing statements there at about, for the last 15 minutes, and then everything's gone after that point. So it looks like you guys have a pretty tight schedule that you're going to be maintaining, and I do want anybody who's watching this who is going to be going to the Ark encounter for the protest, please make sure that you've allotted not only the 4 hours for that time that you're going to be there, but also keep an eye on the weather, because if you're going to be there and it's going to get hot, then please keep yourself hydrated. You guys have a lot
bring
of
water.
yelling and screaming ahead of you.
Bring water. Bring a chair if you want. There'll be some tents. There might be some shady spots for you to sit. We don't want anyone getting hurt. Do whatever you gotta do to stay safe.
Oh yeah, especially since you're going to be starting out on a highway. If you want to bring children, please, please, please be very careful with them. Do not let them get near the highway. Do everything in your power to keep yourself and your children safe. On the website, you actually are asking parents to not bring your children unless you are willing to keep them very well supervised.
Yes, it's sometimes with all the turmoil and commotion, it's hard to keep track of kids. That's why we've kind of asked that children under a certain age don't come. But if you're a parent and needs to bring their kids, just keep a good eye on them, and everything will be good.
Yep. All right, so you guys have been doing this for 3 years. We've got your schedule out of the way, so we know exactly what's going to be happening there. We know that you've got a bunch of really good guest speakers that are lined up. You've got Andrews, Raw, Kelly Helton, and Phil Ferguson, Monica Burns, Debbie Allen, and you've got more speakers to be announced as well. So could you tell me about that? Is it just that if anybody shows up, then they might be getting a guest speaker role at that point?
I think it was just I can't say for sure, but I think it was just we're still trying to get as many people as we can to show up. Anyone who wants a spot, we're giving it to them.
Gotcha.
I mean, not anyone, but we're trying to get a lot of people to show up.
Are you saying you don't want the guest speaker Eric Hovind?
I was thinking more about myself there and just gonna let any Yahoo get up there and talk, but
Well, I would love to be there as a speaker if that is something I can do in the future, whenever that time comes around.
well, maybe next year I'll hit you up a little bit earlier than 2 days before the protest.
Well, I knew about the protest itself because I wanted to go. I just hadn't thought about, hey, should I do a video about this? People are probably doing that to death, but it's really not getting a ton of exposure in the community right now.
No, dude, we want as many people talking about this as we can get. It don't matter like who, just we want all the coverage, we want all the attention, because the more attention that gets put on this protest, the more attention we get to put back on Ken Ham and expose him for what he is.
Oh yeah, you have to put a spotlight on bad ideas, which I think is the kind of the big takeaway from everything that's been going on here. Any bad idea it is, whether it's slaughtering innocent people, which is something that we've heard advocated already by young Earth creationists. Cough, cough.
Yeah. And this is why we've been advertising. We've got the big sign, that says Genocide at Incest Park. Because that's what we really think it is.
Oh, yeah. And what the best part is that even though the Bible is filled with incest, and it doesn't exactly paint it in a terrible light, it is one of the arguments that you will hear apologists use constantly against homosexuality.
Yeah.
We've covered most of everything that really is going to be going on at the Ark Park. So the last thing I would say is, do you have any closing statements, anything that you would like people to know that you can shout out on my channel or others? And this video, when this is done, anybody who wants to use this is free to mirror this, by the way. This is anybody's video to use because I want this to get out there.
Yes. All the exposure. I guess closing, really, the big thing is, if you want more information on the Ark Protest, you can look up on the American Atheist Facebook page or the Tristate Free Thinkers Facebook page. They'll be posted there as well. It's really what we want to do is, we care about truth, we care about actual science. That's what we care about, education. We don't want we don't want people deceiving our children into thinking complete ridiculous nonsense. And this is really what the heart of it is. He's got kids going through the Ark, every day, showing them just the most ridiculous things. And it's kind of heartbreaking. Come see us at the American Atheist table if you're planning on going to the Ark. Other than that, we've covered everything. I mean, I don't think there's really anything to say. I'm excited. I want to see a lot of people there. Let's do it to it.
Alrighty. Awesome, awesome. Well, for everybody who is watching, whenever this video does eventually come out, should be either tomorrow or Friday right before the event. It's going to be one of the two. Just depends on when I can get to editing it.
Alright. I'm just looking forward to seeing how dumb I sound.
Well, with that said, for everybody who is going to be at the event, I am 100% behind you in every way, shape, and form I possibly can be. Please go say hi to Michael Steward when you get to the event, because this has been an awesome time meeting him, and I've really enjoyed doing this interview. And I will be incredibly happy to see what comes of this event, and maybe at some point we can get people to realize that some bad ideas are just not worth having.
Absolutely.
Alrighty, well, this was very enjoyable. It was very good meeting you, Mike.
Yeah, I'm glad I got to talk to you. I've been seeing you post a lot of videos on Reddit, and I was like, I'm gonna hit up that Doomhammer guy. Yeah, I get the reference. I know what that outfit is.
I'm so happy that you know that it's Thrall, because I get called Thor so many times.
Oh God, no, it's Thrall. It's Green Jesus.
It is Green Jesus all the way, and even though his character became shit after Cataclysm, that's fine.
Oh God, he's just not there anymore. He's just gone.
We still remember Thrall when he was.